And we are live, baby.
All right, what's going on, people? Gator Nation. Florida Gators get the W over Missouri in the SEC tournament, 95-81. A tough, hard-fought victory for the Florida Gators as they come out on top. The score really doesn't kind of indicate how the game went, but we're going to get into that all for these next about 30 minutes or so. If you're new to the program, I am Dylan Denmark. That is Graham Marsh on this episode of Denmark and Marsh. A little bit of a different show. We usually give you one the morning after a Gator basketball game, middle of the week, but we didn't have one because the SEC tournament started a couple of days ago. Florida just played their first game.
And the boys had a double bye.
Yes, and they'll play the winner of the Kentucky-Alabama game that is going on right now. I know not most of you, but there's most people, Graham, college basketball just started. For them, it's a 3-week sport. I know you don't have a life. For you, it started when they played game one way back in, November or December.
That's right. They tipped off against USF here in Jacksonville, the arena. I was at the game.
Golly, it's been really that long. Jeez.
I was wearing this hat, too.
Of course. That's where you got it. Graham, let's jump into the game. Florida jumps out to a 10-0 run. And I'm sitting here chilling. I'm thinking, okay, like Florida's got this game. They should run away with it. And then it kind of turned into what the game that Florida and Missouri played back in mid-January when Missouri beat Florida. And it was an ugly game. Missouri made it physical. Florida never had a big lead after that until late in the second half when Walter Clayton came back. I heard early, correct me if I'm wrong, Graham, he went out with cramps. Yeah. And then he came back from the locker room.
It was early second half. He was cramping.
Yeah, it was about with like 16 minutes left in the game. He went to the locker room with cramps and came back. And then 40.
But luckily, our school made a special drink for that kind of thing.
Yeah, called Gatorade. But all in all, I mean, I remember you said a couple weeks ago that you would rather have Florida lose early. That way they could rest for the tournament. Would you have rather them lose tonight and be done, or are you glad they won now that you're in the moment?
Yes.
I knew you were going to give me little stupid answers.
I'm conflicted emotionally. I talked about this with Hack this morning on Gator Bites. I will answer your question in a second. Before that, though, because you just raised a lot of good points, and we'll get into all of it. But before we do all that, though, let's get to the most important thing. Okay, I want to take us back. I want to take us back a little bit, back a ways, a couple months ago. Okay, during something that all our listeners are familiar with called football season. If you recall, Dylan, do you remember you and I did a show? We did a post-game reaction show after the Florida LSU game when the Gators had a huge win against the Louisiana State University Tigers. You and I got on here. We were hype as hell. We're talking about the boys, huge win. And I remember you asked me a question at the very beginning of the show, and I'm going to ask you the same question. You said at the beginning of that show, you said, Grant, can we just talk about how good DJ Lagway is at football? And I'm going to ask you, Dylan, before we get into the game, before we get into talking about the tournament and how far do you want to go and all that, can we just talk about how good Walter Clayton Jr. is at the sport of basketball? I mean, this guy is unbelievable. That move in the first half where the Gators are in transition, they're moving the ball. Walt he's about to charge to the rim. You can tell he's going to try to get like a right-handed layup, maybe get fouled, whatever, go up with it. Go up strong, right? He turns around like he's going to go pull up from three. Two guys from Missouri, knowing it's Walter Clayton, and he's lights out. They run up to him. They're trying to close out. They sprint up to him, and then he just cuts right back underneath and gets the easiest layup of his life. Dude, it was like Steph Curry stuff, bro. It was unbelievable. I mean, this guy, look, he needs to stay healthy. The cramp, he should be fine with the cramps. I think that's fine. But I mean, this guy is legitimately one of the 2 or 3 best college basketball players in the country, Dylan. Like I'm not even being facetious. I'm not even trying to like be dramatic or anything. Like I understand the logo that's on my head. I understand that I bleed orange and blue. I get it. But like legitimately, like I'm being serious. when you talk about the best college basketball players in America, it's Janai Broome, it's Cooper Flagg, whatever order you want to put those two in, and it might be Walter Clayton Jr. third. I mean, he's unbelievable.
I heard Hickens say this the other day, and I couldn't believe it. Walter Clayton's the first ever person to be the first team All-American in
For the
college
Gators?
basketball. Yeah. That's pretty wild.
He's the first ever Florida first team, which Hacker and I were talking about this morning. Like, I mean, dude, Joakim Noah, Al Horford, like Mike Miller, Haslam, Maxwell, like all these dudes from back at Patrick Young, even like who's Patrick Young's point guard? Scotty Wilbekin. Like, none of those guys are first team. It was weird with Noah. I was like, how in the world was Joakim Noah never first team? And I do remember that the first year that Florida went and won it all in 2006, they kind of came out of nowhere. And the Clay, they kind of came out of nowhere that year. And then the second year, if you remember, Greg Oden was at Ohio State.
Yeah.
He was obviously the big man that got – so I guess, but like, how in the world did Joakim Noah ever make a first team? I mean, that was crazy. But anyways, man, like, he is so good, Dylan. And when Walter Clayton is on, and he's on a lot. I won't even just say when he's on. When Walter Clayton is Walter Clayton, when he's playing within himself, when he's not off, I legitimately believe the Gators are the best team in the country. I'm so serious about that. I think they're better than Auburn. I think they're better than Duke.
Well, I mean think about this.
Why did they go to Auburn and beat them on their home court? Why did they do that? Because Walter Clayton Jr. was unbelievable that day.
I mean, think about this. I wrote this down. With 12 minutes left in the game, Alex Condon had 1 point. And then he had a big dunk with about 4.5 minutes left. And then I think he got another big dunk after that. Yeah, he got the putback, and then he had another back dunk after that. So he got a dunk with 4.5 minutes left and 3 minutes left in the game. I think before that point, he only had 1 point. And Florida had a 7 to 10 point lead for that entire game. And he was pretty much not it. Now, I mean, he played. Am I at the Ritz? No, I'm at the friggin' That's funny. I wish I was.
Tony says, why is it Dylan at the Ritz, dude?
That's hilarious. But Condon only had 1 point. Like,
belt to ass, Jesse. Belt to ass. Yes, sir.
This is a dude that had, 2 weeks ago, had a career high of, 27 points? I mean, the last couple of weeks, it's been Walter Clayton's been the best player, and then number 2 has been Alex Condon. And Alex Condon was nowhere near to be seen when it came to getting points.
Yeah, but that's why this team is so good. I mean, how many times this year have we, talked about the game on our podcast the day after, and we talked about, yeah, man, this was the Walter Clayton game. This was the Will Richard game. This was the Denzel Aberdeen game. This was the Thomas Houck game. This was the Alex Condon game. Like, there are so many dudes on this team that can be like the guy that beats you that night. More than likely on any given night, it's going to be Walter Clayton because he's your best player. But, I mean, look, Will Richard has won them games this year. Thomas Houck has won them games this year. Alex, to your point, Alex Condon in other games has been unbelievable. Tonight, at least scoring-wise, wasn't necessarily the main guy getting all the points. But at the end of the game, he was the last 5 minutes of that game, he was unstoppable. The last 5 minutes of the game, Todd Golden made an adjustment to start pounding that ball inside and getting it in the paint because one of their bigs had fouled out, their main big.
Yeah, they went small.
I mean, and that's another thing really quick too. Todd Golden is such a phenomenal coach. He is unbelievable, Dylan. Like, and look, like I'll hand up, like I'll admit, like I'm not like a big X's and O's basketball guy. Like football, when you and I talk football, we can get a little bit more in the nitty-gritty of stuff and a little bit more in the weeds and coaching decisions we do like and don't like, whatever. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know exactly like where they need to set their next screen and, all that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend and try to tell you that I'm John Rothstein. But what I do know is two things. I do know that when Florida runs into issues offensively, And when it feels like whoever they're playing defensively has an answer for what they're currently trying to do, it feels like Todd Golden always has that counterpunch. He always knows the next thing to do. And, Mike White was famous at Florida for these 10-minute scoring drought. It'd be 8 minutes. 8 minutes would go by in the second half, and they'd have 4 points or something ridiculous. That doesn't happen with this team, and that doesn't happen with Todd Golden as a coach because they never let themselves get in that rut for too long. Whenever something's bugging them and something's bothering them, they get to their next thing, and they don't let a defense just sit on doing the same thing over and over and over again. They have an answer. And then the other part about Todd Golden that I love, and you don't have to know anything about the game to know this, that dude is – if you ever watch him during the game, that dude is 110 miles an hour the whole game. He's clapping dudes up. He's hyping the crowd when it's appropriate. He's getting on dudes' ass. He's he's getting on the refs. Like, he's doing everything possible to give the Gators an edge and make sure that they don't play flat, that they play with emotion. And I believe this wholeheartedly, Dylan. Tell me if you feel otherwise. Every sport, I like my coach to have a little bit of edge, a little bit of attitude. In college basketball, I would venture to say you have to. Like, the best coaches are all that way. I mean, like Duke, when Coach K was at Duke, like, he was like that. He was passionate. He was getting after it. Rob says Mike White's adjustments were not existent. Todd is – yes, correct, Rob. You are absolutely right. Don't let anybody tell you that Florida needed to be complacent with Mike White. Those people are wrong. But Patino goes crazy. Roy Williams went crazy when he was doing his thing back in the day at North Carolina and Kansas.
Bruce Pearl.
Bruce Pearl looks like he's going to explode at any given moment. Rick Barnes might be a little more reserved. Even Rick Barnes gets pretty into it. You see what I'm saying? Like, the best coaches that you're watching play games in the Elite Eight and the Final Four and those guys get into it. And Todd Golden seems cut from the exact same cloth, and I love every second of watching his team play.
The most impressive thing I think that's not talked about enough is when Florida hit that injury stretch and they had, he had Handlockton come back. He didn't want to take his red shirt. And it's almost like this team hasn't missed a beat. Like, a lot of teams and a lot of coaches, they would mess that up, or they wouldn't do the right correction and they will lose a couple of games and then they would figure it out later down the road. You haven't seen that with Mike White at all. I mean, and they know how to get the right out of – he knows how to get the most out of everybody. With the bigs, with the guards. I mean, you're deep at every position, and it's not like, Florida – it's not like, we don't have a Cooper Flag. We don't have a guy where you can hone in on and say, okay, you have to key in on him because somebody else is going to be open.
Yeah. And then that's what I was saying a minute ago. Like, okay, you want to get after Walter Clayton the whole game and not give him any clean looks. Well, there's a guy named Will Richard who's going to dump the ball right off to. There's a guy named Elijah Martin that he's going to dump the ball right off to that can make threes and drive to the rack. There's a guy named Alex Condon inside that's going to give you hell. There's a guy coming off the bench, by the way, named Thomas Houck that's going to be, even though he didn't even start, probably the best player on the floor when he gets on it. Denzel Aberdeen, they're just so deep. And everybody fills a very obvious role, and everybody knows exactly what they're doing. That was one thing I think we talked about a couple weeks ago, Dylan, that I was a little concerned about, that it feels like they've really, put to bed and they've really figured out. The one thing I was a little concerned about was with all these injuries they had between Condon getting hurt, Handlockton coming back, Martin getting hurt, Clayton getting hurt, it allowed these other guys to step up, and it made them deeper. Because now Urban Klobzer has gotten into the rotation. Denzel Aberdeen has gotten a decent amount of minutes. And Micah Handlockton's obviously back, which is objectively a good thing. But I was a little worried about their rotations. Because when they get all these guys back that had been accustomed to playing a certain amount of minutes, but then these guys during the injury stretch had replaced a lot of those minutes, I was curious how that was going to work and if that was going to disrupt people's rhythm and make it tough on certain guys to contribute in the same way. And it did a little, I think. I think that Georgia game, they didn't play well. I'm not trying to make excuses for them. They should have played better in that game. But I do think that their starting lineup was a little wonky that game. And the type of minutes guys were playing was a little – and you could tell everything was just a little off. And guys weren't totally sure of how they were going to contribute. Ever since they've gotten back to their OG starting lineup, Martin, Richard, Clayton, Condon, and Chinyelu, and then the other guys coming off the bench accordingly, everybody knows exactly what they're doing now, and they're really deep. So, and Todd adjusts his rotations very well. Also, he's really good at feeding the hot hand, giving a guy extra minutes if he's playing well, taking a guy out if he's not playing well, and not letting him beat himself more than he needs to, and that sort of thing. He just has an extremely, extremely good feel for that, and he has an extremely good feel for how he builds the roster because obviously they're deep everywhere for a reason. I can't say enough good things about this team.
Yeah, Rob mentioned he's noticed every game they have started by getting Richard some touches to see if he's hot. If not, they go away from him. Yeah, he had 13 at the half. He was the second leading scorer, and then he didn't get another bucket until like late. I think in the final 5 minutes of the game, if I'm not mistaken. I think he ended up around with 17 points. Graham, I want to spend one more thing on this game before we'll talk big picture for tomorrow and then where we see Florida in the tournament. Turnovers. Way too many turnovers this game. Way too many empty possessions. I mean, I feel like if Florida could cut the turnovers in half, I feel like this would have been a 15 to 17 point game, mostly in the second half, and Missouri would have had no shot.
Yeah, I agree that, and that's been their bugaboo all year. We talked over a month ago, I think now, about how with Walter Clayton, he's a natural 2 playing the 1. So how is that going to work? He clearly put all that stuff to bed. I mean, that dude can play the 1. I mean, come on. Like I was wrong back then. Hand up. He's proved me wrong a million times over. But Walt and some other guys, there are times they get a little lax on their dribble, a little lax on their passes, bad passes. They're not on the same page. You know, a guy cuts one way, a guy passes the other way type of thing. I do agree with you. They cut down on those turnovers, and that game never even becomes interesting in the second half. They're going to be 20-plus the whole second half, and that's been the case in other games this year as well. So I definitely agree with you. And then you look at in March. I say in March. It's March now. You look at in the tournament and then the NCAA tournament. It's probably not going to be an issue even if they do turn the ball over in the first couple of rounds, because they're going to be a 1 seed or at worst 2. But once you get into that Sweet 16, that Elite 8, and you start playing really good clubs, Florida's beaten a bunch of good clubs. I still predict them to win those games. But I do think that could be something that in a couple of weeks we're sitting here saying, okay, I'm a little bit worried because of this.
Florida had 10 turnovers in the first half, and they had 6 in the second half, so a total of 16 turnovers in the game. Florida started red hot from 3. I think they started 5 for 6. I know they started 4 for 4. I think they ended up being, I wrote it down right here, 6 for 8 with 7 minutes left in the first half, and they were only 2 for 10 from beyond the arc in the second half. So Florida puts this game to bed, and they move on to tomorrow. They will play at 3:30. They'll play the winner of Kentucky, Alabama. Who do you want to win the game, Kentucky or Alabama?
I was talking about this. I'm in a group chat with some buddies. We were watching the game. When we were talking about the Gator game earlier, we were talking about this game, and I'm kind of going back and forth right now because I personally think the Gators match up better without. I mean, they match up well with both teams, but they match up even better with Alabama, I think. And they've proven that. They just went to Alabama and beat them. They've beaten them in the last 2 years. Florida's, I believe, 3-1 against Alabama, and they got screwed in the game in Tuscaloosa last. They should be 4-0, honestly. So matchup-wise, I like Bama better, but revenge is sweet. And I want to be able to say that the Gators beat Kentucky this year. And because, look, if you remember that game, first of all, Florida has improved leaps and bounds since they played in early January, since they played Kentucky in early January Rupp. Secondly, complete BS that Kentucky didn't have a return trip to Gainesville. Third, Florida, if you remember that game, Dylan, and I'm sure a lot of people listening remember this as well, in my opinion, Florida outplayed Kentucky that day. It's just that Kobe Brea, who plays for Kentucky and is the best three-point shooter in the country, he couldn't miss. He literally could not. And he had a couple looks that we should not have let him get. But he also had some shots where he's got a hand right in his face. He's just making stupid shots at home. On a neutral court, Kentucky doesn't beat the Gators, man, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd much rather play Kentucky. Bama's just one of those teams where if they get high, they're going to score 97. Not that Florida can. They obviously can, but
they just scored 95.
Yeah, I'd much rather take my chances against Kentucky. Jesse in the chat says he'd much rather have Kentucky in that revenge game. And Alabama's up right now, 25-21, 9 minutes left in the first half. So
Rob saying UF missed 13. Yes, Rob, you're correct. And Rob, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I wanted to say. I think I've said it before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. You can tell with this team, with the Gators, pretty much right away in the first 2 minutes of a game if they're like mentally locked in, because this team typically does not miss a whole lot of free throws. Basically every game they've lost, they've shot horribly at the line. And pretty much every game they've lost also, they've lost simply because their focus wasn't 100% there. And with the exception of maybe the Tennessee game, I think Tennessee at home, that was a revenge game for them. That was going to be tough to win from the start, and then Walter turned his ankle in that game as well. But Kentucky, Georgia, and who's the other loss I'm missing?
Kentucky.
No, Missouri.
Missouri
game at home. Those games, I mean, Walter Clayton, who doesn't miss free throws, wasn't even shooting well in those and shooting free throws well in those games. So you can tell right away the first couple trips to the line. If Florida's missing a lot, you can kind of tell it might be a tough day. But normally when Florida's hitting and they're in rhythm, I'm telling you, I legitimately believe they're the best basketball team in the country.
Yeah, and with that, I think they've secured a 1 seed after tonight's win. I mean, any skepticism that you think they had, I mean, I don't see how Florida's not a 1 seed after tonight's win. Agree or disagree?
Give me a win tomorrow to guarantee it. I think it was at 60% before this, maybe 55% before this game was played. I think it's at about 75% now. I think you win tomorrow, it's at 100%, pretty much officially.
Gotcha. All right. With the tournament coming up next weekend, we'll know the brackets Sunday night. First and second round is going to be next week. I told you, I think it was last week, that I see this team going to the Final Four and losing to a team from the SEC. I was just spitballing, just throwing something out there. It's losing to a team like Tennessee. I don't know what it is.
Don't say that.
I don't know what it is. I feel more now that Florida is going to be at least in the national title game just because of how well they're playing right now. But all these people, I don't know if it's like this on your social media feed, but it's definitely like this on my TikTok and my algorithm. So many people have talked about how many bets they've placed months ago, how they put on the Florida Gators to win a national title, and now you have all these people that watch basketball casually say that the Florida Gators will win the national title. I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like being the team that's at the top where everybody thinks that they're going to win the title.
They're not at the top. Auburn's at the top. So you're good.
Well, technically, but everybody has the expectation. Like everybody has, if I have to make a bracket right now, I feel like a lot of average people have Florida winning it.
Yeah. I don't care. I'll have the whole country. Doesn't matter to me. And they got snubbed in award season besides Walter Clayton getting first team all team. Bruce Pearl won Coach of the Year. Todd Golden should have won Coach of the Year. Thomas Houck didn't win 6-man. They'll have motivation. I'm good.
So we'll wait for next week for that. I was going to ask you for a Final Four, but we still got to wait to hear what Cooper Flagg, his update is. Yeah, Cooper Flagg, dude, hey, man, you need to wait for the NBA. You need to rest that ankle or your foot, whatever it was that happened yesterday with your lower extremity. You don't need to play in this tournament, man. I mean, we can all agree on that, right?
Yeah, you got the NBA to worry about.
Yeah, you got the NBA to worry about.
They'll play in the league. I don't care, man. Cooper Flagg, American flag.
Oh,
doesn't matter what flag. Gators by 100.
I'm about to say Lakers in 5. Oh my God! If you know, you know. All right, let's see here. Let me give you an update on the Alabama game. If you
Yeah,
have any
I have
questions
it
in chat,
on.
go ahead and throw them out there to us, and we'll answer them. I know this is something we usually don't do after a post game.
What is this? Questions you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, if
If we
anybody
have
got
any.
questions right now, fire away.
Alabama leads Kentucky right now 27-21. Alabama is 0 for 9 from 3, and they're up 27-21 right now.
That ain't good. That ain't good for Mark Pope's crew because they're not going to stay over 9.
And they have well, here's the reason. Kentucky has 6 turnovers to Alabama 0, and Alabama has 10 points off turnovers. So
That'll do it.
that's your game. So Alabama, and that's the thing. I mean, if Alabama, they're leading right now, and they haven't even hit a 3. I mean, we all know that they can hit a 3. They can go on a run and the snap of a finger and score 10 points in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Kentucky can't stop Bama from driving. So yeah, it's we'll see. Florida will play tomorrow at 3:30. Do you want to see them win the SEC tournament now that it's here?
Yeah, that's right. I told you I'd answer this. Yes. So here's the thing: if they're gonna win tomorrow and play in the championship game, go win it. If you're not gonna win, lose tomorrow and get you another day off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm just not I remember last year when Florida played all the way through the tournament, and they were you could tell they weren't as rested. But I'm not really worried about that as much this year. The team, the quality of opponent that you're going to play, and at least the first round, you're probably going to be playing a 15 or 16 seed. I'm not worried about, one person going off because Florida for the other team, because Florida can match that. And then in the second round, the quality of opponent's going to be a little better, but it's still not to where, I would say, Florida needs an extra day of rest. So I want Florida to win these next 2 games if they can. And then,
for all intents and purposes, the NCAA tournament should start at the Sweet 16.
Yeah. Yes.
Florida should.
Yeah. All right. Got a question
through
from
the first
Rob.
week.
Is it me or Martin hasn't been the same since his injury?
Rob, I put this up because, Rob, I do agree with you. He's been a little bit off, I think, ever since that hip. And I don't know if it's 100% the injury. I think it's maybe partly the injury and partly what we were talking about a minute ago in terms of rotation. I know he's starting now and kind of doing what he was doing. But Martin, you felt like was one of the best, like the Walter Clayton Jr., Alex Condon conversation we were having a minute ago about best players on the team. Before he got hurt, Martin was in that conversation, right? And you felt like, late in the game, a couple minutes left, you need a bucket. Like Martin's going to be one of your guys you're going to, and it's not really that's not necessarily the case anymore. And I think that maybe just disrupted, not as confident, still a confident player, but maybe just the rhythm of kind of being that go-to guy is kind of how I feel about
it. Gotcha.
Real strong opinions from Dylan on that.
Yeah. No, it doesn't feel like he hasn't had good games the last couple of weeks. I wrote down halftime. Florida led 50-37. Florida had 10 turnovers. Clayton had 17. Richard had 13. Alex Condon had 1. And then I didn't write it down, but I know he had a couple of nice baskets toward the end of the game. But it's one of those things where it's probably he's probably not feeling 100% right now. But we'll see as we get into next week and the tournament. It's been a great year, and I know this is how basketball works for college. But the season starts now. Everybody's season starts the conference tournament, and college basketball is a 3-week sport. You start watching in March, along with everybody in the country. I know it's a little different for Florida because they've been a really good team, and most people have known that since late December, early January. But if you get bounced to the Sweet 16, it's a disappointing year.
With the expectations this team has, absolutely.
Yeah. You have to, at bare minimum, make an Elite Eight. And if you lose in the Elite Eight, it feels like a bad year. Because you can't be one of the best teams in the country and fall short. At least that short. You have to make at least the Final Four. in my opinion, because you don't get this. You very, very, very rarely get this. These kind of teams. I mean, I was very little. I was 7, 8 years old whenever Florida won last their title back in 06 and 07 when they had Joakim Noah and Al Horford. And I don't remember the first one in 06 when they beat UCLA. I remember when they beat Ohio State. And we haven't had a team like that since then.
Yeah. You remember the Final Four run with Pat Young and Scotty Wilbekin and all those boys, right?
Yeah,
You remember that
in
team.
14, yeah. Was that
Casey
the year?
Fraser and
Was that the year they went
Will
undefeated?
You Get? Remember Will You Get?
Yes, I remember Will You Get. Was
Michael
that the year
Frazier?
they went undefeated in the SEC and then they lost to UConn
Mm-hmm.
in Wisconsin, and then they ended up losing to Wisconsin or UConn again in the tournament?
Shabazz Napier got him.
Yeah, and then they
Shabazz Napier and Boatwright were killing them.
Yeah. I think. I mean, not to compare, but I mean, I think this team is better than that team.
I do too, and it's easily the best that Florida basketball has been since that team.
Yeah.
And then you debate the two teams. I think this team's more well rounded in my opinion. That team played great defense, and they were kind of a ground and pound team. And then you had Michael Frazier that could shoot, but he was kind of your only elite shooter. This team's got shooters everywhere, dude.
Yeah, we got Sean in the chat on YouTube. Even though Florida didn't play well, still won pretty big. They can't turn the ball over like that, like they did. Yeah, we talked about that about 10 minutes ago, Sean. Florida, 16 turnovers. You can't beat good teams like that. So Florida play tomorrow at 3:30. Let me give you one last score check of the game from Kentucky and Alabama, and then we'll get out of here. Let's see. Alabama's up 33-26, and they finally hit a three. So now they're 1 for 10 from three, 46% from the field. And we'll see who they play. I expect it to be Alabama. I hope it's Kentucky. Yeah, Graham, only thing he's done is watch Gator basketball and plan this wedding he's about to do.
That's right.
Making sure he's got the right chicken tender flavors, the right flowers on the table, and making sure that his family of Republicans and Democrats are sitting at the right table.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
So,
I hear when you put them together, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's always a great idea to go.
You put your most liberal family member and your most Republican family member. You just have them talk all night. You give them alcohol too. It's a great combination.
Yeah. There's that, and making sure that people you've never known or never met, and make sure that they're in the wedding. Make sure they travel hundreds of miles. Because that's what it's about.
That's right.
People that you care nothing about and they care nothing about you, but make sure they're there to see your special day.
I want to introduce myself to people on my wedding day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm not having anybody at my wedding. If I ever have one, I would just be me and like 3 people. That's why I have 3 friends. I mean, we're having a bachelor party next week. We're having more people at this bachelor party than I have friends. It's unreal. It makes no sense.
They're just not that big. I think it's 9 guys coming. One guy dropped out.
I don't have 9 friends. I have like 4. If my car breaks down right now on the way home, I got 2 people to call.
Who's that?
And I don't know if you're getting that phone call.
I'm making the phone call, but I don't know how to fix the car. So
yeah. All right. All right, I'm done. We'll see y'all next week. Make sure y'all tell a friend to tell a friend. I don't know what we're gonna do a show next, Graham. Maybe do one Sunday, depending if they make it all the way or right when the bracket gets released. Possibly. We'll be in Vegas for the bachelor party for Graham's since he's getting hitched in a month. That's so right. We don't know if we're going to be doing a show live from Vegas, and in the cabana we'll be turned with like thousands of people, making sure they cash their bets, which would be pretty lit. So fun times in the month of March.
Yes, sir.
So all right, people, I'm Dylan Denmark. That's Graham Marsh. We'll see y'all next time.
Yes, sir.